The next thing we were going to do was Commodore. Commodore had distribution. The name Commodore was in every retail store in Europe. And what we were going to do is to license the Commodore name to anything with a plug on it. So it could be toasters and kettles and you name it, it didn't matter. We would let them license the name.
And we actually saw that with Commodore branded MP3 players, which were out there for a little while. You had Commodore branded cell phone. Of course, most of us in the States never really saw any of that. So Gateway buys Amiga and then sells Amiga. Oh, you'll have a Commodore cell phone. There you go.
So we got revenue coming in from the names, the licensing fees and so on.
So our plan was that we were going to offer the Commodore names particularly to Chinese manufacturers, but not necessarily, for something like a 2.5 or 3% royalty charge on top of their wholesale price. So the idea would be, let's say you've got Honky Conky Tonky making electric kettles, right? And they wanted to sell those electric kettles into the European market. Nobody would buy Honky Conky Shonky as a name, right? But you offer them the right to use the Commodore name, right?
With Amiga, what we were going to do was to license the name Amiga, particularly for things like clothing. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we got asked all the time for T-shirts and tracksuits and you name it. So we would license again that name to anybody who wanted to make and manufacture clothing.
So that every single time one of those products was sold into the European market, we'd collect a royalty for it. Now, that could be huge numbers because anything with a plug on it could be sold as a Commodore branded product.
As far as the Amiga was concerned, that was what we were going to concentrate on. But we would also license the Amiga name for things like clothing, fashion items. Because again, everybody wanted to buy Amiga T-shirts and all those sorts of things. So we do exactly the same thing with the Amiga. And we were going to license to anybody who wanted to manufacture basically anything with a plug on it. A toaster, a kettle, it didn't matter.
As far as the Amiga was concerned, we would do that, but only with things like clothing, fashion clothing, because Amiga was a good name for that, and we would do the same thing royalty-wise.
We were going to do exactly the same thing with the name Commodore. Our plan was to allow licensing the badge and the name Commodore on virtually anything with a plug on it. Toasters, kettles, hair curlers. It didn't matter. Because the name was a very good brand name and it was accepted in all the retail stores. So the idea was, again, license it.
Then you take the name Commodore. Commodore could be sold and utilized for anything with a plug on it, because we had distribution in every retail store in the whole of Europe and some in America. So, for example, somebody who produces, hair dryers or shavers or toasters, they could license the name Commodore from us in the same deal to pay us 2% because it was a name that was worth having, right?
So our intention was to license the name Commodore to anybody who made anything with a plug on it. Toasters, kettles, didn't matter, because the name is so well known and accepted by the consumers.
Something like that. And the same thing with every other, consumer product with a plug on it.
Again, the Amiga name. We believe that Amiga was, everybody knows it was an incredible name, and the number of times that we kept being asked for things like clothing. Yeah, so again, we intended to license the name for all sorts of things, like clothing in particular, bags and various other things.
First of all, Commodore, the Commodore name and the chicken head logo. What we were going to do is that we were going to license that to anything with a plug on it. So you got all of these companies in China making products, some of them very good, that their name is Honky Conky Shonky. They got absolutely no chance of getting into the European market. So we just say, right, you can license the Commodore brand. We want 3% of your wholesale price as royalty.
That's good business sense. Okay, nobody had thought of that. We had.
So we would have licensed the Commodore name to anybody who made anything with a plug on it. Toasters, kettles, it didn't matter. Televisions, hi-fis, it didn't matter. If they wanted this Commodore name, they would pay us a royalty to use the name.
License the Commodore name and the Commodore logo for anything with a plug on it. See, as far as I was concerned, Commodore as a computer product had no long-term future.
because we'd gone past it with Amiga and so on and so forth. So I was going to license for a small fee, for example, anybody who produced a kettle. So we have a Commodore kettle, Commodore hairdryer, right? Because the reason being that Commodore was a brand name that was available in all the retail stores in Europe, and they would have accepted it as a product, as a brand name, recognizable brand name.
As far as the Amiga brand was concerned, the only thing I was going to do with that licensing it would be things like clothing. You know, everybody loves t-shirts and tracksuits and all these sort of thing. License the Amiga name to people providing that and getting a royalty from it.
So then you're in a situation where you've got a Chinese company. Let's say they're called Honky Wonky Shonky, right? And they've got a nice product, but nobody's going to buy it with a name like that. So you say, right, we'll charge you 3% of your trade price, and we will give you the logo that you can use and mark it under our name.
Let's take the Amiga name. Now, Amiga, we were always asked for things like clothing, T-shirts, caps, tracksuits, anything with the merchandise, anything at all with the Amiga. We were done exactly the same. License the name, and you can manufacture it.
That's good business sense. Okay, nobody had thought of that. We had.
Because I think then you'll get a realization of just how tragic it was that we weren't able to do what we wanted to do.